Hi, I'm Marcia Lehman and I'm a Knox County Master Gardener. Today we're going to be pruning a beautyberry. The American beautyberry is a native plant in much of the southeast of the U.S. and that includes Knox County and the area around us. At the same time, I want to advise you that there are several non-native varieties of beautyberry. So if you go to a nursery and just buy a plant that's labeled beautyberry, you don't really know what you're getting. This is a case where you really want to check the botanical name. So the American beautyberry, which is a native, documented in the handout that accompanies this video, is Callicarpa americana. And if you see that botanical name, Callicarpa americana, then you have the American beautyberry and it is a native. If you see something such as Callicarpa japonica, which looks like Japan, yes, in fact, it is an import from Asia. Now, there's also a couple of differences between the native and the non-native. Both of them are cane shrubs, and so they get pruned as cane shrubs. But if you're buying the beautyberry because of that lovely display of fruits in the fall, you definitely want the American beautyberry. And again, there are pictures in the handout that highlight the difference. The berries are a much deeper purple on the American variety, and they are attached directly to the stem, kind of like a cluster right on the stem, whereas the Japanese beautyberry has a short, maybe half-inch stem and then a small cluster of light purple berries attached to that short half-inch stem. So most folks, most of the year, this is not a particularly attractive shrub. When it's dormant, there's no interest here. Even once it leaves out and when it flowers, the flowers are not real obvious. What people grow it for are those gorgeous clusters of deep purple berries. And if that's what you want, then make sure you get the American beautyberry. And the only way to know for sure when you're buying a nursery plant is to check the tag and look for Callicarpa americana. This one's been in the ground here at the Concord Gardens for 4, maybe 5 years. And to the best of my knowledge has never been pruned. So it's going to need some serious pruning, but it makes a good example of how to prune a beautyberry. And as I mentioned, it has not been pruned. And when you just look at the base of it, you can say, oh yes, it has not been pruned. It looks a bit like a gnarly mess. Beautyberries bloom on new wood, so that means they get pruned while they're dormant. So this is the right time of year to be pruning. And then when it wakes up, it puts out new growth, it flowers on that new growth, and it will produce those berries on the new growth. There are 2 primary recommendations for pruning beautyberries because they do grow rapidly. One is to go in and every year take out about 1/3 of the canes. And that's how I will start today. We'll go in and we'll take out crossing branches and the like, but we're going to take out 1/3 of the canes that are on this shrub. The second recommendation is to give it a renovation pruning each and every year because it is fast growing. If you want a nice, somewhat rounded shape to the bush when it's in leaf and blossoms and fruit in late summer and fall, then renovation pruning is actually recommended, and that's where you take it down to between 6 and 12 inches above the ground and you just cut back everything. Then when it starts to grow, it's growing at about the same rate and you end up with a somewhat rounded shape. When you do the 1/3, you're going to end up maybe having to take back some of the moonshots, some of the long whips, but when you do the renovation pruning, you tend to get a more rounded shape. So depending on the shape that you want on your beautyberry will actually help you decide, do you want to do the, let me go in and thin out, take out 1/3 of the canes each year, or let me do this renovation pruning where I just cut everything back in the fall. And if you choose to just go with the simpler one, that would be do the renovation. Just come in and take everything back to about 6 inches, not more than 12 inches tall. So let's get started. So in my tote today, first I have my pruners on my hips, but this is mostly going to be a lopper task since I'm taking out canes. And when I take out the 1/3 of the canes, I want to take them out as low as I can possibly go. All my tools have been sanitized, and it's a bit cool today, so I'm actually wearing gloves. So let me, actually, I'm going to take off a couple of these side branches of a cane that's going to come out completely, but since it's whacking me in the face, and I don't really care for that, I'm going to take out a couple of things here first, just to give me access into the canes that I'm going to remove. So that opens up a little bit. Well, yeah, that's enough. So he said we're going to come in and take this off as low as I can go. So that creates a little space for me. And it becomes really obvious which are the older canes. First, they're the fatter canes. And the second is they get really woody looking. They've got almost bark texture to them, whereas newer canes tend to be smoother. So the older canes become pretty obvious. And as you can see, some of those are about 1 inch in diameter, and the wood is pretty tough. So, and again, you can see that having not been pruned, we've got some growth that's not particularly attractive. We've got, again, a low growing one. We'll take that off. There we go. And then here's an old one, which I'll cut back part way just to create some access to it. And then I'll come back in and clean that up a little lower. So there's one more old one, really old. I mean, it's got textured bark to it. It's not at all smooth. The good news is it is still green. It is still alive. Okay, so yeah, I've got one more old one here that I should probably get out. And if you do this, if in fact you prune every year, then you'll have easier access into the plant. So let me pause here for a moment and come around. Let me just stand up and walk around here a little bit. Make sure that I'm still in the picture. I still have some cleanup to do here because we've got a stem that comes up and then stuff growing back into the middle, and we want airflow and sunshine. That's a new cane that I'll keep. I need to get the loppers and take that one out. But we've got crossing branches here. That's an old... It's also the case that the older wood is much harder to cut. So Okay, we're gonna that cane looks dead, at least at that point. We've got a little bit of green there. When it's dormant and you're not sure, you know, if you try and bend it and it breaks, it's dead. Or you can come back to a bud, make a snip, and look at the tip, and at that point now it does have some green. So you can tip them back. So that one will be okay once I can get my saw in. A couple of those cuts that I made, I'm going to have to take my saw, because it's more than I can do with loppers, and cut it down closer to the ground. But you don't need to watch me do that. So here are the stubs of the 4 really big old canes that I took out. And each of those is at least 1 inch in diameter. This one's probably 1 1/4 inches. This one is more like 1.5 inches, so definitely more than a lopper could do. That was a little bit of work. So now that I've got all that old wood out, what I have left here is 1 small cane that we trimmed back because it had some dead on it. A second cane that's probably 2 years old, maybe 3, not as old as those big stubs. This one, which we got some crossing going on here, so something has to give. And the first thing to go is going to be this one, because it comes off this side shoot and grows back into the center. So again, being a cane shrub, you can prune those. That's a volunteer something or the other. You can prune those pretty hard, because this one grows on new wood, blooms on new wood. So when it comes out of dormancy, it's going to take off. So this is crossing. We'll take that off. These are rubbing. So I'll take that off back here. This will look pretty sparse, but part of the reason for that is that it's been several years since it had a good pruning, or since it was pruned. In fact, that biggest stub that I took off still has the original tag on it. So there's the plant tag. Not the best place to store it, but we could, yeah. You know, now we're getting into the fine tuning. And frankly, at this point, I would leave all these other canes, even if they're a little whip-like. And then as they start to leaf out and it fills up with leaves, I could come back and do a little more cleanup. So that's basically it. I'm left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I took out 4 really big ones, even though I took them out in pieces. So that means there were 11 stems. I took out 1/3 of them. 12 would have been exactly 1/3, but roughly 1/3. We'll let this grow this year, and then try and keep up with it on an annual basis. Okay, so that's pruning if you're going to do the 1/3 each year. Now, I did talk to the folks who look after these beds, and their comment was, go ahead and prune it however you want to prune it, whatever is the right way to prune it. We've never touched it. Again, these are volunteers who have taken over the maintenance of it. They are not the ones who originally planted it. So what I'm going to do now, for those of you who are thinking you might want to do the renewal pruning, I'll show you what that looks like. If you were going to do renewal pruning, you would just start with that and take everything off down low. But I decided to show you both ways. So I did the 1/3 removal, and now I'm going to come back and with my loppers, just take everything off back between 6 and 12 inches above the ground. And I'm cutting right above a bud. So some will be slightly taller than others. They don't all have to be 6 inches. This little one I can get. And then I've got one dead stub in here, so we'll take that out too. So you can see that doing the renovation pruning is a much easier, much faster process. And again, if you want a more compact, more rounded plant, then you would do this renovation pruning every single year. And you'll see some other videos where they take it down even lower. I would do that if that's your process from the time you buy the plant. The fact that this plant has grown 5 or 6 years before it got its first pruning is what convinced me to take these a little taller. But if you had all small canes, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch diameter, then I would take it down even lower. But there we go. So if you're going out to buy a Beautyberry, make sure you get the American Beautyberry, and the only way you're going to know for sure is to get the botanical name Callicarpa americana, and then you know you've got the American Beautyberry that will get the deep purple fruits in the nice cluster right on the stem. Again, take a look at the handout. There are pictures in the handout, and there are additional references in the handout. I hope you learned something today. Thank you for joining us.